All right, we are talking Fargazer today. It's a pretty unique mod, really cool one. I actually really like it, and I've been using it here lately, which is why I want to talk about it. So there's going to be two main parts. First part is going to be me talking about it and its properties, different things that it does, and how you can increase its damage, etc., etc. And then the other part will be why it needs to be buffed, because it does. It needs some love, unfortunately. Not that I think it's a bad mod. I don't necessarily think it's bad, but it's fallen behind. So, if you already know all about Fargazer, you can just skip right ahead to wherever you want to be. I'm going to be playing through using only Fargazer. That's going to be the gameplay. Me only using Fargazer to go through here. So let's get going. First thing to talk about. What is Fargazer? If for some reason you do not know what Fargazer is and what it does, since it's been added to the game 2 years ago or however long ago it was, but you activate the mod and it summons an Eye of Legion. This Eye of Legion will then target the guy that you are aiming at and apply Stacks of Madness. These Stacks of Madness can stack up to 10 times, dealing damage each second. So baseline, when you're fully upgraded, this thing is going to do 9 damage for every stack, so it goes up to 90 damage a second at 10 stacks. The madness will last for 5 seconds, and the mod itself will last for 30 seconds. That's all kind of baseline, but also me being fully upgraded as far as some of the damage values go. Now, obviously, you'll notice my numbers are different because we've done some things to enhance it. One of the first things we should clear up right away when talking about Fargazer is the madness itself. It says a status called madness, or madness status, whatever. It's not actually a status effect. So if you're using the various pieces of gear that involve status effects, whether it's increasing status effect damage, durations, etc., none of it interacts with it because it's technically not a status effect, despite it saying status in the description. So don't try and use those things, unfortunately. It would be really cool if they opened it up to interact with that. I think that would give it some interesting combinations and versatility, make it a little bit more, at least just another option for status effects, right? But anyways, the next thing we should talk about is what it is, and that's a summon. So the mod is summoning an entity that will then do things, right? So you need to understand that it counts for your various summon rings, like Soul Link and Soul Guard. So those give you bonuses for having an active summon. Well, Fargazer is an active summon. So if you have Soul Guard on, you'll get a stack of Bulwark. I have Soul Link on. The damage from Madness does lifesteal, so I'll be able to get some healing off of the madness stacks, which is pretty nice. Now, because it is a summon, there are some other cons that go with it, right? The pros are it interacts with the various summon items. The downside is the damage itself is not mod damage, because the mod is summoning something. The mod isn't doing damage, the summon is doing damage. So if you use items that increase mod damage, or you use the Archon archetype that increases your mod damage, or even the Summoner archetype, which increases your mod damage, none of it is going to increase this madness's damage. So it doesn't interact with those, which is really annoying, especially with the Summoner, because the Summoner is all about having summons, and the fact that nothing the Summoner has in his kit actively increases the damage of your Fargazer is a bit obnoxious. So how do you increase its damage? Well, the first most simple way is to just use flat damage increases. So that's going to be things like Burden of the Destroyer, things that literally increase your damage, period, regardless of whatever the damage type is. And so I've chosen to use like Burden of the Destroyer and also the Medic and the Alchemist archetypes because they do flat damage increases. So that's your first, most easy avenue of increasing its damage. Another thing you can do, because it is a summon, you can actually use the Soulstone Amulet. The Soulstone Amulet increases your summon damage by 30%, which is what I have on right here. It's a pretty solid amount. Since the Fargazer is a summon, that Soulstone Amulet is going to increase the madness damage, which is nice. That's good. That's a good way to do it. I personally, obviously, don't just do that simply to increase your Fargazer's damage. That's wildly inefficient because you're not increasing any other damage. If you are also using the various summoner summons and stuff, then I think it's an option that you can consider. Another way of doing it, after I answer my door. Another way you can do it, because not only is it a summon and a summon dealing damage, it's dealing physical damage. So you can use the Shade Bloom Crystal, which increases your physical or elemental damage as it alternates. That physical damage increase will actually increase the Fargazer damage, which also I just want to notice, if it hasn't been clear, using Fargazer will not aggro enemies, which is really satisfying at times. We can just sit here and do this. That's pretty funny. I like it a lot. Too bad the Stalker's brand, which does increase damage to unaware enemies. Oh, actually, the Assassin's brand. Ooh, have I checked that? Hold on. Wow. Okay. We'll check it with the Assassin Seal. Stalker's brand doesn't do... It only does ranged and melee damage to unaware targets. So, let me check the Assassin Seal. All damage dealt to enemies not aware of you. Okay, we're going to give that a go. We're going to try that and see what happens. So, physical damage. If you're able to increase physical damage, which I'm pretty sure the only way of doing that specifically is through the Shade Bloom, you can do it like that. The other thing you could do... Is it increase? I'm having a hard time telling. I don't remember what the numbers were before. But another thing you can do to increase its damage is to use Exposed. So Exposed will increase all the damage they take, so if you are able to apply it to the enemy, it will also increase the damage of Madness, which is, again, just a nice extra thing if that happens to be what you're running, right? Now, a couple other interesting things. As you've seen here, obviously it doesn't immediately aggro anything, so you can just activate it and then let it Fargaze onto people while you just stand there in the back. It also gets critical hits, so you've probably noticed here and there that it will get critical hits. But you can't really increase that crit chance and crit damage. If you run like Probability Chord or Burden of a Gambler or anything like that, none of those increase the critical damage, and therefore it didn't look like it increased the crit chance or anything either. So you're not going to be able to up it by doing that. It's just going to be whatever it is. There probably is some other way you could possibly crank it up, but honestly I didn't care to dive that deep, because why would you? But it also applies stagger. It has a stagger damage value, so as you can see they're getting staggered there. You're really only going to notice it on your light enemies like these guys, the Duran, the Drones. I did notice it staggering the elite pan guards occasionally too, but that was also over the course of the full 30 to 45 seconds that the Madness or the eye was active. So it's not, you can't rely on it to just quickly stagger things while you're trying to win a fight, because at that point you're also just shooting them. So I mean, you could make an argument for it's a cumulative stagger value that's adding, so it's just more stagger that you're applying to the enemy target while you're also shooting them, because that's ultimately where this mod is going to shine, is when you're also using it in tandem with your regular gunfire. I should also note too, this thing says it has a 25 meter range. I don't think that's true, or if it is, its line of sight and ability to target things is incredibly janky, because there have been times where I know I'm within 25 meters of a target and it just does not target them, and then there's other times I'm barely peeking at an enemy through pillars and trees and it's somehow targeting them. So I don't understand it. It also doesn't seem to be affected by amplitude or other size radius increases, which is a bit of a shame as well, because that could be pretty interesting if it was actually affected by those effects. I think that's pretty much it as far as things to talk about with the Madness. So now we need to talk about why it needs to be buffed. Because it does. It really does. It has fallen behind the other things that have been, updated here recently. Now, the main thing that I will compare it to is going to be Familiar, naturally. Familiar is just absolute top tier mod now. I always really liked it before anyways, and now it's just even better. It's just better. Please target him. Oh, it did work that time. So the reason I compare it to that one is because they have a lot of the same properties. Familiar is a summon as well, much like the Space Crabs, Night Guard, and Root Lash. All of those are summons. The other thing is, they're both mods that are going to last for a while. Familiar lasts for 20 seconds baseline, and they're both mods you can activate and swap weapons and still have it do things, right? It does not look like the Assassin's Seal is doing any more damage. 193. No, it doesn't look like it is. That's a bit of a bummer. Right, yeah. So they're both mods that you can activate, have active in doing things while you're doing things with your guns, swapping weapons, and they're still active, still doing things, right? Long durations, etc. However, pretty much everything that the Fargazer does, Familiar just does better. A Familiar doesn't last as long. It's 20 seconds as opposed to 30 seconds. However, it's also cheaper. The Fargazer costs 1,250 mod power, while the Familiar costs 750. It's a 500 mod power difference for 10 seconds, right? Now, you could then argue, well, maybe it's also more expensive because Fargazer does more damage, except it really doesn't. So, at max stacks, our Fargazer is going to do 90 damage per second, and that is actually 90 per second, and it says so in the tooltip. The Familiar attacks deals, I think it was 75 damage with each attack. Well, this says 25, but if we equip it, I think it says 75. So it does that much damage with each attack. Note it doesn't say per second, because the reality is Familiar is attacking something like twice a second. So the truth is, it's actually doing something closer to 150 damage per second. So it's doing more damage than Fargazer. The other thing is, the Familiar is just going to auto attack targets for you. You don't have to aim at them. You don't have to do anything. As soon as you activate the Familiar, it just starts going to work. And that's it. You don't have to do anything else from there, which is just better than Fargazer. You could make some kind of argument that Fargazer has more precision, so you can choose who it's doing damage to, which, I could agree with that. But I feel as though for the most part, when that really matters is when you're fighting a boss and you really just want that boss to take the damage. If you're fighting an elite and there are a bunch of ads, honestly, having the Familiar go around and do damage to the ads and clear the extra chaff around you is incredibly helpful. And because it does so much damage and it lasts for so long, it'll clear those guys out and then go right onto the elite or the guy that you're actually trying to target as soon as it's ready to go. And so, honestly, I don't feel as though the Fargazer being able to target what you're targeting is really that much of a benefit, if a benefit at all, right? And so Familiar's winning out on cost, it's winning out on damage, ease of use. It's just kind of better. It also counts for a summon, so all of the rings and stuff that you're getting interactions with for Fargazer, Soul Link, Soul Guard, the Familiar is also getting benefits from. And I've also noticed that the Familiar seems to be affected by your various aura and radius increases. So if you use magnifying glass or amplitude, I feel as though the bird actually goes out and targets things from further away. So, Fargazer doesn't get that. So that's a bit of a bummer. The one thing I guess you could maybe make an argument for is that as you're seeing here, this has been a pretty quiet run through the jungle because Fargazer doesn't aggro anything. So you can't give that kind of credit to the Familiar because it is 100% going to start pissing off some enemies and they're going to start attacking you. So, I mean, the reality is it's just fallen behind. It's just fallen behind. It needs some love in order to be any amount of competitive or comparable to some of these other mods. Even the Night Guard, even Space Crabs, your various other summons. The Root Lash is, I also feel, kind of weak here, but it also does lifesteal. I personally just don't really like the Root Lash a whole lot anyways, but, that's kind of just me. So how could they buff it? I mean, bear in mind, I'm not a developer, right? I'm not some expert in anything. I'm just a dude. But if I were to try and make it better and be competitive with something like the Familiar, the first thing I would probably do is just make it do more damage, man. If I'm going to have to aim down sights, if it's going to be more expensive, almost 50% more expensive, then it should have the damage to show for it. And right now, it doesn't. It just doesn't have that damage. And so I think it should do more damage. And I think somebody could probably make some argument that, well, Fargazer is easier to get. It's one of the first dungeons you can get in Yesha. You can roll it pretty easy. If you want to get familiar, that's going to require you to essentially play through the Nightweaver adventure mode, and then also roll the Huntress in order to get her dream and beat her. So there's a little more steps involved in order to get familiar. But frankly, I don't even think getting the familiar is really that much of a problem, because you're not having to roll consecutive worlds or get both of them at the same time. If you had to get the Nightweaver world and the Huntress in that world, that would be a bit more tedious and trouble to get. But you don't. All you have to do is get the Dream Staff, and as soon as you have the Dreamcatcher Staff, all you have to do is roll the Huntress, and that's it. So really, that's not an argument you could make that Fargazer is easier to get. And even if you did want to continue to make that argument, I will also bring in our next exhibit, which is Volte Grandeur. Fills in a similar spot as far as dungeons and world progression goes, except for Losum. And Volte Grandeur is now super incredibly good. You send it out there, it does a ton of damage, lasts for a while, it's easy to access. All you have to do is get that first dungeon, and that's it, man. So Fargazer being easier to get, not an argument you could make, I would say. Some other more outlandish ideas, I guess, if you wanted, you could make the Fargazer auto target. That would make it easier to use, because when you have to go around and dodge things, it means you're no longer aiming at targets, so you're not getting the stacks of madness on guys. And when it only lasts for 5 seconds, that madness can fall off fairly easily. So yeah, that could be an option, but I don't like that idea, because I think you should keep it as is. I think it's very unique where it targets something that you're looking at, as opposed to just doing whatever it wants, you know what I mean? Actually, does it even affect the arms? Ooh, see, that's another thing. It doesn't always affect enemies. There it goes. But part of it could be range. So when I fight Shahala, I notice I have some issues. God dang it. I have some issues getting the boss with it. Or at least I don't seem to notice it actually hitting the boss, period. But that simply could be the range, because technically Shahala is pretty far away when it floats there off the edge of the arena. So that's something to keep in mind. Which actually, can I target? It'll actually hit that. So we could technically just be sitting here aiming at the old Corruptor. But the damage, I mean, look how long this is going to take, man. I mean, granted, obviously you're not supposed to just use only the Fargazer, right? That's ridiculous. You shouldn't be doing that. Is it actually doing damage to him now? While he's doing that, it doesn't seem to be doing any damage at all. Oh no, it's ticking a little bit away at him, I guess. I don't see any damage numbers, though, because I would like to see if the elemental... Well, I guess that dude's probably not elemental resist. It's technically that dude. Not getting him. Another idea is, if you get them to max stacks, maybe it should do even more bonus damage, or maybe madness makes them take more damage. I don't know. Like, those are other outlandish ideas. Simple fix is simply adjust mod power costs, adjust duration, adjust damage. That would be the simple, straightforward fix, right? Let me see how much damage it does this dude. I want to know if elemental... Nope, elemental resist does not seem to affect it. So that's nice, because sometimes things are affected by elemental resist that really shouldn't be. Things like what's it called, bleed, sometimes seems to be affected by elemental resist, which is ridiculous. Yeah, pretty chill. All right, here we go. Now we'll start targeting him. Targeting him now, please. Fargazer. Oh, now it doesn't want to target the guy. Of course not. Why would it want to target the boss when I'm actually trying to target him? God, see how long that would take. Yeah, the damage is just... it's weird, because you look at it and you'd say, oh, well, 193 per second that's a pretty good amount of damage. If my burning effect was doing 193 per second, I would say, wow, that's some really strong fire, right? But I don't feel that way, because god dang it, the status effects, like the burning and overloaded and stuff, they feel a lot more manageable to get bunches of stacks on, to actually do lots and lots of numbers of damage. And again, it's when comparing it to these other various mods that are going to do different damage numbers. For example, you know, familiar, etc. Blah 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 blah. Oh, I gotta get this active again. Yeah, so I don't know. It just needs some love. And I fought Keula earlier using only this. It took a very long time. As you can see, this is gonna take a very long time, right? I switched it to the familiar. It was such a huge difference. I mean, we could switch it right now because it's right next to it. We got a lot of just auto mod charging going on, so we can make this happen. We're not going to use our crossbow still. I do have Crystal Heart on. I'm going for this kind of relic crazy healing with the medic. I'm going to die here, though, because I'm being an idiot. Yeah. It'll be fine. This will go a clean start. If we start off this fight with familiar, you'll be able to see just the difference, because it just does. The damage difference it's so stark. It's so stark. This has 146 with each attack, as opposed to the 193. And that's 146 twice a second. The other part of it, too, why familiar is so much better than Fargazer. Fargazer takes so much time to ramp up. You have to ramp up the damage. It doesn't start off doing max damage. You have to build it. And then if you lose that focus on the target, all the damage goes away. Whereas this is just going to go right at it. Now, I will say this. Notice how this is only doing 80 damage. I did notice this when fighting one of those steel... what do you call it? Steel... root guys. The ones that throw out their heart thing, and that's where they're actually weak. It was still doing the full damage. And so notice how this... he has armor. He's taking less damage from the familiar. Fargazer does seem to just ignore armor, which is really helpful. I will give it that. And familiar does do that. Look at that. See, that body technically still exists as an entity. And so familiar has decided to just keep attacking it, even though it's technically dead. Because it's still going back and it's going to be healed up. Familiar will kind of hit things in an AoE, it seems, as well. So I went in here, brought it back out in an attempt to show that the familiar will do so much better than the Fargazer. But really, this is actually a pretty good fight case for the Fargazer, actually. Though, even though this is still doing 160 a second. And notice we don't have to aim or do anything like that. We just walk around and we're good to go. And see, this is probably one of those cases where I was mentioning having to target things and then choosing who I want it to hit. This is probably a case where having the Fargazer be able to target what I want is actually helpful, because when the Corruptor comes down, I want the familiar to actually be on the Corruptor and not the big statue mini-face, right? And I'm not sure that the familiar will switch from this dude's body, because he's technically not dead, and then go up to get the Corruptor. So, you know, that's another point in Fargazer's benefit, I guess, you know? So, maybe it's not as bad as I was kind of giving it credit for, or, you know, trying to disparage it, I suppose. But I still do largely think that a Fargazer needs a little bit of love. Needs something. You know what I mean? Let's go ahead and see. Alright, let's see. Is it going to go get the Corruptor? It doesn't. What is it targeting? Is it targeting birds? Yeah, I don't know where it went off to. Alright. So there we go. The bird went off doing something. I don't know what, but it did it. That was something I noticed it doing a dungeon earlier. Sometimes it would just kind of wander off, which was a bit obnoxious. We switch it back to Fargazer, because, you know, it is actually doing better against this boss. Keula, familiar, was way better. But hey, you know what? In this specific circumstance, you know, Fargazer's better, which is kind of cool. Oh, are you serious? Okay, we're gonna have to tank this. There we go. Let's see what we can do. Got it. No problem. Get max stacks on this dude. Now, that is a strategy you could do with familiar. Once you get max stacks on guys, if you can just occasionally refresh it, you can keep doing multiple instances of damage to multiple enemies. But it, that's a bit tedious to do because you have to specifically aim at them. It only lasts for 5 seconds, so you really have to juggle it, and that's a bit of a pain in the butt. Still not targeting the Corruptor. I guess he's too far away, because of course he is. Why wouldn't he be? Alright, this might be it. It'll be close. Might be good. Fargazer, get him. Yeah, there we go. I was kind of worried it wouldn't be within range. Would be super frustrating. Looks like it's not quite enough. That's a bummer. If the range on this was actually what it seems like it's supposed to be, and it was just any good at actually targeting, I feel like I should be able to actually get madness on the main body from here. But I guess that's not the case. Oh, part of the problem with the range is probably that Fargazer ends up floating around in faraway places. Come on, come on. Go down, go down, go down. No, apply the madness. Apply madness. Oh, I can't reach him. Fargazer, get him. Oh my god. Stupid range on this friggin' mod, dude. Alright, Fargazer. Oh, lord. God dang it. Oh, whatever. I'm done. You get the point. Another thing I forgot to mention about it. Because it's increased by flat damage numbers, right? So the Invigorated perk, 25% increase to all damage affects it. If you put on Summoner, if you put on the Archon, which both increase the mod damage, on the tooltips it says that the damage is increased. It is not. I tried it. It did not increase the damage. But if you go to Challenger, who does an increase to all damage based on how close you are to him, that didn't actually increase its damage for some reason, which is weird. I feel like that shouldn't be the case. I actually didn't test it with Explorer, which I should probably do, but I'm too lazy to do it now. Another thing I would like to try, and I just couldn't roll it, was I wanted to use it with the it's a mod that increases, or the legendary perk that increases the number of summons you can have by 1. I don't think it will work with that because Fargazer doesn't function the way it used to, where it basically charged up while it was active. You activate it and then all the mod was gone and it was immediately charging up. So I don't think it would work with that, but I'd be curious to try it. I would also like to see if it interacts. Even though I know all the other rings that do stuff with status effects, it doesn't actually interact with the madness. There's another legendary one that when you apply status effects to an enemy, it applies vulnerable as well, or exposed. And so I would like to see if it would actually interact with that one as well, because that would be kind of cool. I don't think it would make it worth it, but it would be a fun interaction. That's pretty much it. Thank you guys for joining me. Please buff Fargazer.